Yes. Okay. We just listened very interesting presentation about intelligent assistants to knowledge workers such as doctors, right? And we saw how difficult these problems are. And David was quite open about all this complexity. But now we're going to listen to very experienced people in decision management, business process management, Denis and Tom DeBevoise, about creation of generic intelligent assistants for knowledge workers. And what I really like, they're going to talk about natural language processing, about business event detection and processing. That's I usually call this situation awareness, and that's what we missed so far over these 3 days. I'm really looking forward for this presentation and to learn more about your experience. Tom, Denis, take over.
Thank you. Thank you, Jacob. Thank you, everybody. Welcome to this presentation. Thanks to the road warriors that are still sticking around after a couple of days of presentation. We're very happy to engage on this topic. So today's topic, intelligent assistance for knowledge worker, 2 keywords there, assistants and knowledge workers. We're talking about natural language processing for business event detection and processing. We're saying natural language processing, but we're really focusing on the natural language understanding portion of NLP. First caveat is that Tom and I had decided to do a very short presentation, but we ran out of time, so we have a very long presentation. So all the slides are available. We're going to try to skip some of the slides, but all the slides are provided to give you context. It is a big scope of things that we're tackling, and we wanted to give you quite a good flavor for everything. So outline for today, setting the stage about the notion of situational lifting, the quest for intelligent automation and the AI of today's, a little bit of knowledge work, which is basically our use case. Then we're going to talk about intelligent assistance for knowledge worker, which is our goal. Tom is then going to introduce to us the natural language processing for business event detection and processing. And then we'll do our particular approach, which is called NLP situational lifting. And then we'll show our real estate example. The caveat or the safe haven statement is that this is research work. It's not a product yet, but that's certainly our goal. We started in a very pragmatic way where we tackle a particular very specific situation, which was the real estate operation point of view. And we're in the process of generalizing all this globally. Also, another acknowledgement is that this work was under the leadership of Tom. So setting the stage about situational lifting very quickly, as I mentioned, knowledge work. So the keywords here are knowledge work. And most of knowledge work, contrary to mundane work or operationalized work that gets automated a lot, and we've been working in this DecisionCAMP on how we can automate a lot of the mundane and repetitive work. The knowledge work is where the challenges are, or still are. So it is an environment where you deal with unstructured information that is exchanged in an unstructured communication or unstructured collaboration. So there's a lot of unstructured in there, and that's really what we want to tackle. When it comes to knowledge work automation, this is the realm of CMMN. CMMN was introduced in part for knowledge work automation. It's important to understand that in the context of knowledge work automation, as was presented a bit by David just before, our goal is not to automate everything, but it's to provide just-in-time assistance, and hopefully intelligent or contextual just-in-time assistance. So we're really looking to extract from what's going on the situational business entities that are important and the situational business event so that we can bring them forward to the knowledge worker or scaffold the work. I always use that sentence, scaffolding, not shackling. I use that at many sauce because this is really what we're trying to do here. We're not trying to force somebody into a predictive pattern. We're really looking to support what's going on. So what's very particular about what we're presenting today, and I'm going to restate it a couple of times, is that everything we've done here was implemented using BPM+. So we're using BPMN automation and we're using DMN decision to do a lot of the situational lifting models. And part of the reason or the motivation to do that was that it gave us a very visual flow and contextualized environment. It gives us structure, which is visual also, and it gives us a logic that is visual. So it allowed us to maintain and enhance this very efficiently. So the quest for intelligent automation and current AI's approach. Basically, we all know, I think this group is more aware than any, you can't pick up any news article or anything about AI and machine learning around. And basically, the saying is that data is the new oil. Well, but what about knowledge? Why do we want to limit ourselves to data? Data is a side effect of what's going on. We really should look at exploiting knowledge, not just data. Now, machine learning is promoted for just about everything these days, and that's okay. I mean, it does tackle all the problems. Then it becomes a situation of where does it bring value? Our own experience or our own beliefs is that it brings a lot of value whenever there's notions of perception or sensing, but lack a little bit more generalization. And we're also starting to see a lot of machine learning failures for many reasons, and those were talked in different presentations in the last couple of days, and look at that. So another traditional technology that is relevant to what we're presenting is the intelligent document processing, which is all about extracting structured data from unstructured information documents. And most of these capabilities are used to provide data to downstream systems, such as ERP or CRMs or these kind of systems. And they're mostly supported with machine learning. Now, to be effective, these approach needs a lot of representative information to be available so that we can do unsupervised learning or do supervised learning where we need to do a lot of labeling. And if you think about it, the people that label these models, it's yet more knowledge work. So to help knowledge worker, we create more different type of knowledge work, which is labeling. So that's a little bit of where we're looking at bringing some values. And so basically the question is, how do we support knowledge worker and their actual flow of work? So the particular situation they're in. Now, it's not to say that machine learning is not good. It's actually great. It does what it does very, very well. And so we're looking at using or exploiting the outcomes of machine learning so we can decide of what best action to do. So we're taking an approach that is basically recognizing the fact that machine learning lacks some understanding and generalization, and we're bringing symbolic logic to take that point. And again, the neuro-symbolic approach was both in a keynote and a presentation again today. We think it's a very important way. A little bit of differentiator to what was presented earlier this week on neurosymbolic. The approach presented were pretty integrated, sub-symbolic and symbolic approach that were integrated. We're taking more of a loosely coupled approach to this here, but it's along the same thinking. So knowledge work, and I'm going fast because I want to leave all the space to Tom to present his material at the end. So knowledge work was basically a term that was put out by Peter Drucker in 1959. So it's not something new, it's something that's been around for quite a long time. And basically, simply, a knowledge worker is a person that thinks for a living. They're dealing with information, with decision, with problems, with procedure, all these kind of different aspects. And often these knowledge worker, we expect of them, or if we don't expect, they turn out to be what we call the swivel chair integrator. They basically, take the information, the emails, the attached document, brings all this into the context of what's going on. They make things situational and proper in the usage. Now, unstructured communication and document intelligent processor is what our knowledge worker ends up to be. They really readily identify the business events that are taking place within the emails, and they look at the body of the emails and the attachment to figure out what's going on. And then they take this information to support or follow some collaboration with different parties, respond to email and document what's going on, and investigation and other elements. So our goal was to provide some intelligent assistance for knowledge workers. So the opportunity for the intelligent assistance there is that there are many processes that are partly digitized. The data that is important is mostly unstructured. And the key tools for these workers, these knowledge workers, is basically email, SMS, document, contact lists, and calendars. And that's the world probably most of us live in that are assisting to this conference, is what we do for a living. So the digital assistants require some ability to understand the unstructured text with some natural language processing, more particularly natural language understanding. So some basic capability that we would like of some digital assistant is to be able to recognize and manage the stakeholders that are involved into email collaboration or different type of collaboration, to read the email, the body and the subject of the email, to recognize what the context of this particular instance of communication is about, to identify the documentation and the milestones that are going on, and even maybe start preparing draft or classify and store documents or schedule meetings, or as Davide just showed us in healthcare, provide a contextual recommendation. So to do that, the digital assistant would have to understand the various stakeholders that are involved, the current state of the process that is involved, the situational metadata and documentation, so that it can provide or inform on the best next action. So it's a very one-to-one reflection to what Davide was proposing. And in fact, I've been involved with Davide in situational lifting research in the context of healthcare in particular. Here we're taking a more generalized approach. So again, let me repeat this because I think it's very important. Implemented all using FEEL, DMN, and BPMN. So let me pass it on to Tom now, so that we can jump into the different aspects.
Thank you, Denis. Can you hear me okay?
Perfect.
Okay, so again, bring this into context is that this natural language processing that we're doing is occurring in the context of some particular problem domain, real estate, healthcare, whatever, within a particular knowledge worker workflow. So we know that even though the processes are unstructured, they have a lot of common patterns in them. They use similar emails, reports, deliverables, where they're asking for a product, a task, something to occur within their organization. So we are using this commonality among the different tasks to be able to create the situational awareness and help them out with their contacts and calendar events and so forth. Next slide. So the key technology for natural language processing is, hold on, I'm sorry. All right, good, I've got it. All right, the key technology is optical character recognition for PDFs, and mostly we're working with PDFs, and it works, it doesn't matter if the PDF is in text or image. Entity extraction, which hopefully we'll have a better understanding of what entity extraction is. Syntax analysis, where we take the sentences and break them into tokens, which are basically the words. Form extraction, where we're extracting the structure of attributes from a document. And then finally, we have human in the loop labeling, once we have, which we're not covering so much, but once we have actually created a model, we're able to feedback and work with the sentences and utterances that we cannot fix. And then, so in the next sentence, next slide, okay. So what happened? Oh, go ahead. What's happening? We need to be, all right. Okay, on the slide previous. There we go. Thank you. There we go. Situation. That's right. I'm pushing the button too. Situational lifting is the top level process for extracting these business objects and process information from unstructured information. It's the unstructured text with natural language processing. So the next slide. Perfect. Natural. Next slide. All right. So here's our natural language processing process, and it consists of 3 phases. In NLP detection, we're extracting the entities, sentences, tokenizing them, and that is giving us this the tense of the sentence and the sentiment. And in concept lifting, we are going to take those entities and modify them for our particular domain. And then finally, in semantic lifting, we take keywords and other information to extract the process information and the business objects and attributes out of that text. Next sentence. Next slide. So in the first phase of that is NLP detection. So we obtain our entities, tokens, and sentences from the what the vendors call pre-trained models. All right. So Amazon, Google, and Microsoft all have a very similar service that provides this, and it's using a pre-trained model to identify things like person, address, organization, numbers, and so forth. Next slide.
And what's important to say here is that we're reusing this. So we're not trying to reinvent the wheel here. We're using these pre-trained models that already exist that are very powerful from these different vendors. And you can pick whichever vendor you want.
Yes, that's correct. That's correct. They've gone through an extensive machine learning to provide that. And if you think about the problem that they've solved, they can identify an address, a location, a person, a thing, right, from just about any text. So it's very powerful. Not only that, it's even though they don't document it well, they consider it a very important tool in many products that they use. For instance, one product, Microsoft has chatbots for business-specific things. They're using this generic pre-trained entity extraction to do this. So as I mentioned, persons, addresses, locations, and then to use this, however, often we have to regularize the entity, like dates come in, day, month, so you have to convert that into something that field can use, right? Entity extraction is imperfect. It doesn't always work perfectly, but there are ways of correcting it we found over time. So, and you can do it again, any source, any input utterance from a file, email, and so forth. Next slide. So now we've gone down through the paragraph and we've separated out the sentences and the entities and so forth. We've got to do some more work in order to be able to actually provide situational awareness. So in the sentence, for instance, Denis Gagne is a natural person and a presenter is a role, right? That's the generic type, right? But we have to, with our own domain-specific model, decide whether that person is a name based on some additional data that we provide and so forth. So, and then of course, the sentiment, whether it's positive or negative or neutral of the sentence is important. And then the tense, whether it's past, present, or future is important. So next slide. So we do this in concept lifting. So we enhance the entities with meta tag differentiators, right? Which means we might have a service or a list of our own employees or some other information that we can combine these pre-trained entities with in order to come up with a concept of a customer, an employee, a website, and so forth. So next sentence. I'm sorry, next. All right, here's some specific examples, right? So there are services available you can get off the web that will take a series of words and tell you whether or not that's likely a person's name. And similarly, you might look at a person entity and put him into a labor categorization by matching. And of course, there's multiple geolocation services available. All right, so we're able to, with your own services and validation, to actually enhance those entities. And then we have the standard static set where you can extract from those entities emails, URLs, file names, and so forth. And of course, things like order numbers and so forth are categorized with these regular expressions. Next slide. So, and then in the final phase of this, we have semantic lifting. All right, and then basically, for a sentence which has a particular tense and sentiment and contains these enhanced entities that we talked about, all right, we look at keywords within that sentence, and those point to either a business event or a situational business object. So, and this is all predicated on a pretty simple idea that there's only so many ways that you can say that the shipment number is, or the order number is, or the project manager is this name, right? So those keywords we provide into the semantic lifting along with, as I said, the tense of the sentence, the sentiment of the sentence, in order to say that this particular entity that we identified earlier on is, you know, an employee, a person, and so forth. Next slide.
Yeah, just a quick summary here.
Yeah.
So fundamentally, you know, given a sentence like Tom DeBevoise is collaborating with Trisotech to create this presentation, then the NLP detection will tell you that Tom DeBevoise and Trisotech are noun, but it won't know whether Tom DeBevoise is the name of a person or Trisotech is the name of a company. So the concept lifting is to move these concepts to the higher level of this knowledge of understanding. And then after that, it's to take these concepts and these business events and put them in the context of the work that's actually taking place right now for the knowledge worker, which are basically your 3 steps there.
Yes, good summary. I'm not going to go through this eye chart, but it kind of gives you a step-by-step approach of what we are doing with the sentences and the sentiment of that in order to achieve this matching that is occurring. But what I would add is that because this is free text, we have to use fuzzy matching. So you can't have the whole thing fail because someone left a letter off of a word or boxed the letter and so forth. So you have to be able to accommodate fuzzy matching. Next.
Yeah, and I'm going to repeat again, all this fuzzy matching and all this treatment that we're doing with lifting is all done using DMN, FEEL, and the BPMN.
That's correct. So what can we do with it? Again, based on inbound utterances, we can start processes, right? Because we know who's receiving the email, and from the content of that utterance or email, we can start a particular process. We're going to show an example where we respond to a request. We can work on intermediate steps within a workflow. You can add different types of processes or intermediate steps like rejections, reviews, distributions, and so forth. And then, of course, you could distribute attachments for the stakeholders of a particular process. So next, we're going to go through a specific example. All right. And so in this example is a real estate example. So the text itself is a signed contract. Contract is an entity for 2269 Forest Avenue. That would be a location, is enclosed. The proposed closing date is Friday, July 1. So we have these entity, which is a date. The home inspection, which will be considered an event, will be completed by June 14th, which is yet another date. And the MLS listing is at this URL. All right, so, and when we go through our situational lifting, all right, we will actually create a business object that includes this list of business entities and events. I'm sorry, not entities, but business attributes, business object attributes. Okay, so let's go ahead.
By the way, if all this is very obvious to everybody, then we've done a good job. Because that's what you would expect a knowledge worker to extract from such a paragraph. So if we're able to
actually, it's not so obvious. How do you understand semantic of closing date?
Yes, we will present all this in our demo.
Okay.
Yes. Go ahead.
So this is the notional process of what's going on. And here's a quick video of the lifting part.
So this workflow implements that input and with the process and the input pattern to 3 steps. So let's put the workflow into test mode, right? And so in NLP detection, as we mentioned, we use the pre-trained model to get entity sentences and obtain the tense and the sentiment of that utterance that we showed in the prior slide. So let's paste and go ahead to the first step. I put a stop point, and we're just going to go through NLP detection. And this is the part that actually, right now we're going to Google natural language, right? And you can see that we have these entities, other location, event, and the sentences that have been extracted from that. So, and in the next step, we're going to enhance our entities with meta tag differentiators, as we said. So we're going to look at these and see if there's some kind of additional refinement we can do with that entity to make it apply to the domain we're working with. So, give them more take.
Yeah, the video will catch up.
yeah, the video will catch up with me. There we go. All right. So, so let's go through conceptual lifting. All right, and then actually there's only one in here that was lifted, which was the real estate URL. All right, but if there was a person in there, we would have changed from name, person to name, and so forth. So, and then finally in semantic lifting, for each of those sentences, we get the keywords that might apply to the sentence. We marry it with the tense of the sentence, and we obtain the business object that you see here. Is that clear to everyone? Does everyone understand how the process works? So it's really not very complicated. So.
No, it's not clear. For example, you recognize date. This is clear. How do you understand that this is a closing date? Why closing belongs to date? Why it's not something else?
By virtue of the fact that the keyword closing date is in the sentence, this is a date. We have the word keywords closing date, and there could be other keywords that would point to that. And we match that with that particular sentence. And then we say we have the date, and then we combine, and that it's the sentiment is positive.
You mean the word closing is a keyword?
Yeah, closing would be a keyword.
Well, in real estate, of course, it would be.
Yeah. In a real estate domain, that's what that's a good point, Sandy. We're dealing with one specific domain. So anyway, so here's kind of a simplified version of the message processing of what's happening. All right. So in message processing, you would be going through your emails with attachments and looking at the words in there and who their email is directed towards, and maybe some of the filtering that's occurring to see whether or not this is appropriate to perform natural language processing situational awareness, right? Once we do the situational awareness, we hand the business object to a decision area. Again, this is highly simplified, right? And then it decides what to do, who to arbitrate that business object to an existing process, to start a process, or do one of these activities, which would be to archive the attachments, and label the message, and you'll see what I mean by label in a moment, create or update contacts, and create or update calendar events that are associated with a particular process. So again, it's a bit simplified, but that's kind of the high level version of what we're talking about with intelligent assistant. Next slide. So let's go through the real estate operation. Right, and we're going to go ahead and enable a particular process area, which is the closing process. And we can, in our situational awareness, we're going to go ahead and in the closing processes itself is pretty typical of a knowledge worker process, right? And when we see the video, we'll see this, but the closing contract itself has a lot of little sub-processes, inspections that need to be done, compliance information that needs to be provided to various stakeholders, sub-processes like funding, obtaining a mortgage, doing a house inspection, a house valuation, property valuation, and so forth. There's a bunch of these. Actually, in a closing process, there can be up to 22 different processes involved. There can be up to 28 or 29 different documents involved, right? So it's a very, even though it is very structured. It is very dynamic, and things change, shift and change at all times. So let's go ahead and go through the process itself, and hopefully you can get a flavor for what we're talking about.
Should I move directly to the demo?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay.
Okay. So, we're going to use the real estate closing process, as I said, right? And so it's kind of two phases: the pre-signing, the pre-ratification, and the post-signing. So in the first part, we have what occurs before ratification, and then in the second part, we have the inspections and so forth that occur before settlement. So, in everything, we'll go ahead and just run our simulator in here. Everything starts with this closing process once we have a signed contract agreement. And as you can see here, there are many stakeholders involved and many steps involved in the closing of a particular property, right? And the way we develop this process is that once we see a contract arriving at the organization, we read the information in the organization from the closing contract, and we create these events on the calendar, right? We synchronize all of the contexts that come out of that particular contract, and then we create these draft emails, right, for the first two inspections that are associated with it. And you have a lot of artifacts, so we're using Google Cloud Storage to put those artifacts up into the cloud. So you can see right here, we have put that signed contract up into the cloud. All right, so let's talk about the home inspection process. In the home inspection process, we take that draft email and we're going to send it to the inspector, right? And we're going to say, would you please provide who is going to actually inspect the property, when they're going to inspect it, and what the closing information is. So we go ahead and send the request in this email, right? And we'll go back to the inspector, and it says, I want to have a home inspection. And he replies back that, again, September 29, Jim Davis, his email and contact information. And then what's going to happen now is our insistence, we're going to put a scheduled home inspection there. You see all the information from the contract is there, right? We put his contact information into the contact from there, which is important. He's the one. And then we've created an email. We just sent an email to the homeowners that this home inspection is going to occur. So that's pretty quick. If anyone has any questions, you can stop us. But that's the kind of, it takes, for me, yeah, we could just leave it there. For me, this, and working with the subject matter experts on this, what we're doing is we're taking some of the most drudgery, basic stuff out of their task, right? And making sure that the calendar and the contact and the emails are all properly updated, right? And this is should be a terrific kind of productivity improvement for the people using it. One of the chief advantages to this approach is it's like a headless application, right? There is no training involved. There's no workflow to learn. You don't have to log into anywhere. We are using their applications that they know how to use, right? You talk about cellular, you can see the calendar information on your cell phone. You've got an email client already on your cell phone, right? So we're not putting any burden onto the subject matter experts, these knowledge workers, on using this. Right? We're merely accelerating their productivity and making their life easier. So Do you have any comments, Denis?
Yeah, I was going to say the demo went quickly because there's a lot of different parties interacting, replying to one another, scheduling the next meeting, a lot of extraction from the contract of what's going on, who's involved in the contract, who's going to be doing what, when. And so we're extracting all this, lifting it within the context of this particular process of ratification and closing, and then basically scaffolding the work of the different stakeholders in there with meetings and emails and messages. Naturally, the draft email we're using templating here. We didn't get involved into the natural language generation aspect. We're purely focusing on the natural language understanding, and then we're using templating to position everything in place. But as Tom mentioned, we are hopefully showing how we can remove the swiveling chair integration role of the knowledge worker. And the reason we're going through all this is because if you think of it, in order to do this in machine learning, for example, somebody could argue, well, this could be done in machine learning. Agreed. But then you would require an awful lot of examples and data and all this. Although a lot of data exists, not necessarily in your domain. Here we're taking real estate, but think of it as some kind of other kind of knowledge work that needs to take place. Data and example may not be available, and you have to rely on the knowledge, the subject matter expertise knowledge, and the context of what you're trying to achieve. And by putting all these sources of knowledge together, we're able to do, on the first level, the lifting. We showed that at first and demoed that because that was the key part of it, and then put it in the context of the process or the case that's happening. Now, the challenge that we're working on right now is to completely generalize this approach so that it can be used in many different contexts. So as Jacob was correctly pointing, you need some knowledge of the context you're working in. So for example, we need some contextual knowledge about who are the stakeholders in, for example, real estate, and what are the key concept and business object that we need to manipulate, so we can then try to detect them at the lifting and provide them back. And we didn't put it in here, but in the slides, you'll see an example of some of the lifting that we're doing in DMN, for example, for the identifying a company name. So you have a name and you want to know whether it's a company name or not, then you can use all kinds of different source of knowledge that will inform you about what are the possible way in which a company name can be constructed or written, and then we try to do the pattern recognition on this to bring value. So fundamentally, the conclusion is that we've introduced here the notion of situational lifting, which is to extract the business entity, the situational business entity, and the situational business events from an unstructured information and unstructured communication environment. We're using BPM Plus model to quote unquote code this. This could have been coded in Java, Python, or whatever programming language that you want. The benefit of doing it in BPM Plus is that, and we went through a lot of iteration of this, and we're not done, is that we would get lost in our code. We would have, if this was all written in Java or in Python, we would have gotten lost. And what kids like to call refactoring today, we used to call rewriting the code, but there would have been a lot of refactoring. So by using these methods that are available in BPM Plus, our logic was very easy to maintain, to modify. It was isolated, separation of concern. So it gave us a lot of different features that now that we're generalizing it to different domains, it gives us a lot of benefits.
And also for me, Denis, one of a critical thing using the business process approach is the ability to create responsive processes that can listen to these things and keep status of what's happening and keep the decisions up there above and decide what to have happen next. Whereas you don't, it's possible to do this in Go, Golang or Python or whatnot, but as you say, they're just reinventing the wheel, and can they do it as well as we can using a business process decision management approach? That's, an open question. So.
And very interestingly is the whole notion of situational lifting. So now we have situational lifting that we're applying to natural language understanding, so we can put it in the context of knowledge worker. As I mentioned, we're also exploring situational lifting in the context of structured data in healthcare, where you have the structured data, but if you think about it, your data is a reflection of what happened, but the context is usually lost in the data, that unless it's very well populated with meta tag information, you've lost the context. So when you go to reuse this medical information, you have to rebuild the context for your situation to make sure whether it's applicable or not. And that's some of the results that Denis was showing to in the previous conversation. So I think we're going to stop there and go to questions if there are.
That was great, guys. It's and I can't believe you got through like 57 slides, so that's impressive. Plus a video. So now Jan and Ron had very similar questions. So just to paraphrase a little, they said, enough of this process nonsense. Can you tell us about the DMN in the field? What sort of specific problems were you using DMN for? And can you show any examples of that?
Yes, actually we had some, and naturally we skipped them.
Unhide the slide, it is number.
So there was an example
There.
here. Naturally I pressed the wrong button. To get to the slide, you have to press this button.
We didn't say process nonsense, but that's what we thought.
I said I was paraphrasing you, and I just,
That is, you got me all choked up here. That was not a fair paraphrasing at all, Sandy, and you know better.
well, just making sure you guys are still awake, right?
So here's an example. I don't know if this is big enough, and I'm fighting my tool to present it to you. But for example, here's a DMN function, one of the many functions we're using. So this is a very functional approach to this. There's tons of different functions that are created. And here's a particular function that is given a particular name and a series of corporate suffix. And those can be, specific to your country or specific to your environment or to the type of business that you're in. We'll look at matching about the fact whether it's a likely company name. So is this a likely company name or not? And we'll go through, and then we'll basically, again, the benefit is that the first thing is we'll make sure that we have a name with no commas and punctuation, in particular commas, because they come into the identification of the natural language processing. The list of sub-elements that we get then, we'll just break that into the list of all the sub-elements. Because, for example, if you think of it, the Denis Gagne Brothers Inc. Will come out, and you have to chop the Denis Gagne Brothers Inc., chop it out, look at whether the structure is reminiscent or indicative of a business name, so that you can treat this whole object as a single entity. So these are the kind of things that are done there. Again, I would argue that having done this quote unquote code in field makes it very easy for Tom and I to figure out what's going on, know exactly what we need to change where whenever we're hitting any of our problems or issues or enhancing the capability.
Okay.
So I have a decision table. Could you briefly give me control?
I think you already have it, Tom. You just have to share.
Okay.
You would have to unshare your screen, Denis, for Tom to share his.
Sorry.
Okay.
I'm the only one that can, I have God power, but you guys only have like demigod power.
I've always thought you were some kind of a goddess, but if you want to be a god, that's okay.
Or
You can use
Where's
gender neutral
my share
pronouns.
screen. I'm going to share this screen. Can everyone see my decision table?
Yes.
Okay, in this decision table, we detected the event in an incoming email, right? So very simplicity, we have this initialize event where we submit all the contract information. And as a result of that, what comes out of it would be the emails that we're going to generate. So once we initialize the closing process, right, the next step will be this home inspection, environmental, whatever's required. You see, we have the contract requirement column here. We've read the column. It says, I need an environmental inspection. I need a whatnot, right? And then the output is generate these emails. Now, there are other similar types of decision, but we're saying the situational lifting said this happened. Therefore, we're going to use our decision model to say what happens next. So there's a bunch of examples like that. So
that kind of addresses, so Jan had a question about, would you say that you use natural language processing from the email to determine the next action and then do them? And it sounds like that's exactly what's happening.
yeah, we
This
characterize
is a
it.
state machine, right?
What?
This is a state machine.
When you say this, are you talking about the
No,
specific
this
example on
table
the screen?
represents state machine. It deals with different events, event types, and how to react to them, right? Transform
Well,
from one state to another state.
It's, well, we're applying it in a general sense. So the context is more provided by either a process model or a case model, a CMMN model. So, but yes, for example, in a case situation, you could argue that pretty much any case management context can be reduced to a state machine type of environment where the states are the different stages of your case and you're transitioning from one stage to the other. In fact, CMMN was built on this notion that you have the event condition action semantic, but you have moving from stage and milestone as kind of an abstract state machine. So yes, it's certainly one way of abstracting the look of it.
So it's Ron asked how much a standard vocabulary would help with the lifting, and then Alan also commented that it looks like there's a lot of handcrafted logic in here. It's how reusable that would be this being similar domain. So I don't know how much the use of a standard vocabulary would help with moving from one domain to another.
Yeah, we're using the TRIZA technology entity modeler to do this specific quote unquote concept models that we're providing. So we're generalizing it so that you can have the concept from a concept model that will be inputted to the lifting as one of the entrant to what you want to do. So basically, as I said, we're generalizing things. We've done a big part of generalization for the concept lifting by providing it different concepts as input and then doing the lifting there. And then the semantical lifting needs to be generalized as well. Yeah.
Okay, and just to finish up, because we are getting a little tight on time, okay. Jacob wanted to know, you're doing situational lifting, but you're not mentioning any event streaming tool like Kafka. Is there something in there you're not talking about, or?
Oh God, did I dare do a presentation without saying Kafka? Sorry. Let me say.
Sorry, you lose your all your accreditation there. Yes.
Yeah, I guess so. So all this work is independent of the source of the information. So for example, whether my unstructured message come as part of an email or an SMS or whatever front-end treatment that will do that, we're doing the same quote unquote notional algorithm applies of doing the lifting at the concept level, doing the lifting as the semantic level, and then injecting that back in the context. So in fact, if we have event like Kafka event, that's even simpler because it's a structured event. We know what event it is and what context and everything, so we can deal with that a lot easier than the context in which we're dealing now. But we are generating events for the process. So for example, once we have what's going on, this will generate an event to trigger an email, or this will generate an event to trigger another aspect of a process or a case that is going on. So, so we were more at this point interested in generating the business, the situational business object and the situational business events, so they can be captured in the BPMN and CMMN context. But yeah, it's a generalizable idea.
I think if the only thing I wanted to add very briefly, if you see our knowledge entity modeler, is that we're working with the idea of using the examples in the KAM to put sentences and enough information to actually create the keywords that would do something like identify the coordinator within a sentence or in an utterance. So
does that also handle things like obligations? Ron had a question about obligations, like, for example, you can't close until the inspection is done. Obviously, Ron has never bought or sold a house in the Toronto real estate market, but
that, I mean, that would be the next step, obviously. So
right.
to do something like use the rules to generate that.
But a lot of that information comes from the context in which you're working.
Yeah.
So for example, we're not trying, as I mentioned at the beginning, our intent is not to automate things. Our intent is to scaffold the work that the knowledge worker is doing. So in a context of CMMN, the knowledge worker decides what happened next, because in CMMN, everything is optional. So it's a knowledge worker that decides what happens next. Here, we're just trying to scaffold a lot of the work that he's playing as a swivel chair integrator and giving him everything in a structured way. So here's a business object that is meaningful in your context. Here's a business event that is meaningful in your context. And when appropriate, actually trigger the action from that business event.
Right. And there's so many examples of knowledge worker supporting and making recommendations, and scaffolding is what you've done, like kind of helping with what the knowledge workers are doing. Like we saw what Debbie did with the clinical workers, but we just see it across so many different industries.
Compliance, you know, compliance investigations and so forth. Yeah.
Right.
One example.
Okay, we're going to have to cut you guys off now. And we have Carol Ann up next. Thank you so much. That was